Going to be discussing that a little bit later on right here on Morning Express. But we are first of all going to start off with a newspaper review to look at what's making headlines. And joining me this morning, we have Gabriel Muthuma, who's a political expert, to just go through some of the stories that are making headlines and highlight what we have on the dailies this morning. Good morning, Gabriel, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Michael, thank you for having me.
Karibu sana.
Asante
Let's
sana.
dig straight into the dailies, and we start off with the Standard, where we have matters politics taking center stage, and this would probably set up the stage for us also to discuss what we're going to be talking about later on, and that's from 7:30 on matters politics. And the headline is Magic 8 hold key to Ruto's fate. Remember, there has been wind that there could be a plot and a plan and a ploy to have the deputy president impeached. However, of course, that's a tall order, looking at what is required for a deputy president to be impeached. But looking at the numbers based on this article, only 8 members of parliament stand between the deputy president and the looming impeachment, and it's given that breakdown. Gabriel, do you see this as a possible direction that could be taken by the Kieleweke team?
Well, thank you once again, Michael, for having me. Well, when you look at the numbers, yes, somebody can say it's a tall order. Always a tall order, but it's something that can be done. But the numbers probably which I would like to concentrate this morning is not the 8, who, I mean, given the fact that they actually bring quite a heavy load if they were to, join the other side to make the 2/3 majority. Probably what I would be concerned about, and these are the people who are going to start getting quoted. These are the members of parliament who are independent. Mm-hmm. Watch very carefully how our politics will start, moving in the direction of the independent members of parliament. They will become actually a gem in parliament now.
Because they're likely to tilt the scale.
Correct. Yeah, they are seen as, and it's a good thing. I wish we had so many independent members of parliament. I think things may actually be looking.
But then the question is, Gabriel, the question here would be, are they really independent? And when they're independent, are they independent just for the sake of being the attractive flower girl, so to speak, right now? Because of course they're going to be in demand. Or are they independent because their ideology does not agree with the current huge political parties that we have?
There are two things, Michael. One, you may recall in the advent of our elections, most of the people who went independent, they still went independent, but they were supporting a candidate. For instance, so many times you would hear when somebody lost a nomination, they would go and seek to run as an independent, and during their campaigns, they would say, you know what, I'm an independent candidate, but guess what, I am supporting President Uhuru Kenyatta, or I am supporting Mudavadi, or I am supporting Honorable Raila Odinga. So yes, I mean, your question has a lot of validity when you ask, are they independent, or, but now, given the fact that they've come to parliament without having what you would call a party tie, that would mean they may actually go either way, depending on, what will be put on the table. Remember, politics is about interest. So I think a time has come for them to actually make demands as well. So we have to wait and see. Yeah, but it's going to be, trust me, it's going to be quite, yes, it is going to be a very interesting journey when it comes to parliament.
Now, impeachment or not, it looks like the deputy president is definitely a man who is under siege, so to speak, particularly because it looks like, he's literally just, even if he remained in office, he remains with very little influence. And for politics, let's face it, that's really what counts, how much influence you have. What do you see as a future for the deputy president, with or without the impeachment?
Okay, well, first of all, to talk about the impeachment, I've told you it is doable, highly unlikely, but very doable. You saw the ouster of Kipchumba Murkomen from, the majority in the Senate. Now you are looking to see, how the senators have been whipped to actually, ouster or, right the ouster of Kindike. So moving forward, I think this is an exercise that can actually come to fruition if it's, pushed in the right direction and people, like you saw, they are actually made to swim in a row.
Right.
But more than that, I think the deputy president, from where he is seated, he is alive to all these issues. He is alive to what is
Do you see
happening.
him? I mean, he's always been a very tactful politician, a very shrewd politician, one who is not afraid to, take on his, those who are against him head on. But he has seemed to take a somewhat quiet stand now. Do you think he is probably plotting on a comeback?
It could be, but also, Michael, don't forget, in politics, sometimes silence can actually be a very powerful strategy. And so I think with what we are seeing, the deputy president has, I think, pleaded what you call pleading the fifth. And he's kept silent. And up until yesterday, when you saw him at some farm in Kikuyu, he actually had been gone missing. And many people have been asking or wondering, where is he? What is happening? Probably from where he's seated, he's just looking and probably, putting in his piece of puzzles to see the next realignment, where he will fit in, where he'll belong. I would be so surprised for a politician of his caliber if he was just sitting waiting for the hammer to fall.
No, for sure, I'm sure they must.
I don't think, given his political caliber, I don't think that's what he would be doing.
Yeah, he must be probably strategizing, and
Correct.
that includes, of course, his allies. The only thing is, do you think that this got them by surprise? I mean, they were very vocal, very loud, very abrasive, literally almost taking the president head on.
Correct.
But with the removal of Kipchumba Murkomen and Susan Kihika, and now what we are waiting to see is going to happen tomorrow to Kithure Kindike, do you think that maybe that kind of got them off guard, and as a result, they're now, they've gone back into the defense? It
did. And, a good example that we can provide is the numbers we saw when, when Senate was pushing for Murkomen, and now the numbers that we are seeing, the ones that are pushing for the ouster of Kindike. You're saying, or we are being told, or we've looked at some of the statistics that have been provided, already they've reached the 45-member mark, which is, 3 more, of required people to ouster Senator Kindike. But again, this goes on also to tell you that, yes, there had been a lot of what you'd call antagonism. They had gotten to a point where people were totally divided. You knew this wing of what you would call Kieleweke, and this other thing of wing of what people have come to call Tanga. There was almost a time when they were so head-on. And I remember at a particular point where the president said, he in fact directed that no more meetings on the side of, Kieleweke, or people who are saying they are supporting the president, because he largely wanted to concentrate on other agendas. So I think, yes, there was a time when, the situation was quite antagonistic, but now I think with what has happened with these two gentlemen, what is happening in the Senate, I think some have started realizing, well, the president is quite serious, and, if you stand on his way, and you'll get swept off.
Absolutely.
By his,
Okay, and speaking of which, on page 4 of the Standard, we have 6 senators abandon deputy president as Kindike faces sack tomorrow. This is what we're discussing here. And there is a list there of the senators supporting Kithure Kindike's impeachment, and they are up to 49. We do know that there are those who had snubbed the president's meeting, senators specifically, and they were summoned. Some of them, I think only one of them apologized, but it looks like the president is on an onslaught to ensure sure that those who misbehave, so to speak, or do not toe the party lines, then will be dealt with accordingly. And looking at this list, it looks like Kithure Kindike's goose is fried, so to speak, if the motion which has already been tabled goes through.
Yeah, and if those numbers are correct and verified, then I think it's
as good as done.
Yeah, totally, totally. But then again, the sudden change of heart, Michael, you have always to keep in mind that when it comes down to it, politics is about interests. And sometimes politicians are quite, they are quite selfish, if we put that word across. At the end of the day, they are going to take care of their own. So I think when they put apples to apples, what they are losing versus, whether they want to stick it out with the deputy president, and they realize, if I'm ousted, then what? Mainly for the nominated senators, it becomes murky for them. So I think they have to toe the line and go back to the person who can ensure, the person who can, revoke their nominations. So for them, I don't think they have a lot of wiggle room. And it's come too late, but they now realize, the head of the party, still has a
business.
he still wields a lot of power.
Absolutely. All right, let's look at that. Let's just sidestep a little bit from politics and go to page 6 of the Standard, where we have COVID-19 cases hit 1,029 as border row persists. And of course, the numbers are still going up. We have the Ministry of Health doing as much as they can to keep us posted with the numbers, and there seems to be an increase in the numbers. However, I don't know, Gabriel, how you spend your day, but I've observed that it seems to me like Kenyans are somehow crawling back to their normalcy. And when I say normalcy, doing away with the masks, I think majority of Kenyans are wearing masks not to be arrested, as opposed to, having them wear them properly for the sake of keeping healthy. It looks like social distancing is also becoming a term that is almost in the past. What are your thoughts? What are your observations so far?
I mean, another great observation, Michael. I've also observed the very same thing. But foremost, I think life, like you put it, everything is coming back to normal. You can see the traffic on our roads. When you go out, people mingling. It's, soon probably we may start seeing people shaking hands once again.
And hugging.
And hugging, and probably kissing in public. But anyway, apart from that, I go to what CS Health, Mutahi Kagwe said, that if we treat this pandemic normally, it's going to treat us abnormally. That is not just a clever or a wise saying. That is a very huge fact.
Right.
The numbers, as you can see, are going up. If we continue with the current behavior that we are doing what we are doing because we fear being arrested. We are not doing it because we want to bring down our numbers and flatten the curve. Then I think as we open up, the cases are going to rise. And the more they rise, the more the virus continues, to get entrenched in society. So I think at some point, I do not know what, must suffice for us to follow these rules. But the Public Order Act is very clear. If we can follow it to the core, Michael, I believe we can actually flatten this curve quicker than than anticipated. And it's an easy thing. I think keeping our social distance, washing our hands, using alcohol-based sanitizers. I mean, these are things that other countries are doing, and they've they've flattened the curve. If we give a good example, like China. China did not do, an overly ambitious thing to beat the pandemic. They just did the very same things that we are being told.
Right.
So I think we need to take cue from what the CS Health said, that we need to treat this pandemic very abnormally. Otherwise, it's going to
take us by storm and treat us abnormally. But that also brings me to the row between Kenya and Tanzania. Tanzania, of course, has taken a very, very different way and approach of dealing with COVID-19. And as a result, the president announced last week that there's going to be closure of borders and testing of drivers, which has already started.
Right.
But an interesting, something I note here is that according to Tanzania, and this maybe is playing out in the round, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah.
They say that 19 truck drivers who tested positive in Kenya, when retested in Tanzania, turned out to be negative. So there's already either a claim there that Kenya is lying,
yes,
or an attempt for Tanzania to ensure that they show that these tests that are being done by Kenya are nothing to do with COVID-19, but more of a diplomatic row.
In fact, it is. And probably what they may be suggesting next, and I hope they don't do this, is to have an independent person, do the testing at the border. I don't see any reason why Kenya would falsify the results or the tests results. It doesn't make sense, and I don't believe that is the case. But then again, if that's not the case, then we will have to find out why they tested negative in Tanzania. So instead of putting up a big row, I think they had moderated this issue very well, where they said, we can bring the goods up to the border, and then from the border they can be picked. Remember, Michael, we as much as we do not want to create a diplomatic row, we have to keep our citizens safe. I think to me that is the first order. Even when the head of state is swearing in, is to protect the constitution and to protect the Kenyans, and he has to do all that he should and all that he must to ensure that Kenyans are kept safe. And I would believe that the same case applies to President Pombe Magufuli. So yes, you want to see your two countries do the testing that they deserve, and to also keep all the drivers who are the trailer drivers, to keep them from harm's way. But also at the end of the day, you really do not want trade to be affected. I like the fact that they reached out. Two leaders reached out already, and there's something that's going to happen. President Magufuli has already initiated the process of putting up a team that will meet with their counterparts in Kenya at the border to talk about this issue and actually find common ground. But, yes, moving along, I hope this situation does not become murky. It is good to keep testing these drivers, because you know what? They are the ones on the road. And, you remember, and I don't want to bring this into the fore because this is another subject altogether. At the name of, you remember the HIV virus, the truck drivers were actually, they were actually accused of actually spreading the disease far and wide. So I don't think, or we should not hope that this should be the case.
Okay. And maybe also focusing on other things that possibly playing out as a result of COVID-19. We have Kupet and not differing with parents. This is to do with students going back to school. We've seen in some countries where they've reopened their schools, and this is a proposal that is being given by those stakeholders in matters education, and there's a suggestion that schools should be reopened by June 15th. Of course, starting with only the candidates, not every student, but only the candidates. Do you feel that this would be too soon? We're talking about, what, less than a month?
Yeah, I've also seen other countries which have said that schools should be reopened. But Michael, what modalities have we put in place? That to me would be my major concern. When these children are coming back to school, what is on the ground? What measures have we taken before they come back to school? One thing I would agree, Michael, there's a huge disparity that has been opened up. And the disparity that I'm talking about, there's a huge divide between the private and the public schools.
Correct.
The private schools, as you see, most of them who are offering virtual classes are continuing with the syllabus. Most of these other children who are in public schools are actually at home. If you've heard stories that we've been able to read or to hear from, the people that we know and some of their friends, they're telling us there are children in Mashinani who are just helping in house chores. Some, they are, going to
like the education has literally stopped.
Totally. And that just brings out the divide. So I think as we come probably to opening up these institutions, I know there are children that are going to gain. I know there are children who are at home and they are losing a lot. And I'm also wondering, will they be able to catch up in the syllabus? But as you can see, there's going to be a very great divide between the public schools and the private schools. So let's see the modalities. What is the Ministry of Education? What have they put in place? What is the Ministry of Health also putting in place in our academic institutions, mainly the public? Remember, Michael, it was just the other day when we lost so many children in Kakamega. That just tells you if we can actually fail in securing a building pre-COVID, what must we ensure before we let our children, go back to their learning institutions? So let's wait and see the kind of modalities and structures that they put in place before the children go back to school.
All right, let's look at the Daily Nation before we take a break. And on the headline, stolen 328 billion aid cash hidden abroad. And this, of course, will come to the disappointment of Kenyans, although maybe not by surprise. Shame of rich and powerful stealing from the poor and vulnerable exposed in a report on how the World Bank's billions show up in politicians' offshore accounts. This, of course, is not just talking about billions given to Kenya by World Bank for COVID-19, but it seems to have been a trend. Of course, this is not entirely a surprise to Kenyans,
No.
Gabriel, but I think it just annoys more to see that this money literally ends up in individuals' accounts.
Michael, this is a tragedy. But again, as you've put it, it did not start now. It did not start now. And this is something that has happened, before. But the funny thing, in fact, to me, it's more of a joke, because the people who give us this aid, the same, a big chunk of this amount goes back to their countries. So if they are going to help Africa in shaping up and ensuring that we don't see such headlines, they can actually assist to have that money repatriated to the institutions that are going to put it in proper use, or to put it to the original purpose and intention. If such amounts are going back to, to the Caymans, to the UK, to Dubai. There was a time I remember where, our government had done very well to involve institutions like Kroll, to go around and find out the monies that belong to Kenyans that's out abroad. And we started a repatriation process of these monies, but we don't know what happened to it. But, it goes on to tell you that we are nowhere near to ensuring that we sort out this mess. In fact, it looks so bad on us that we get aid money only to turn it back and put it on individual accounts. It really looks bad, not only to one country, but to the entire continent of Africa.
Absolutely, and that's an interesting read for you, particularly if you'd like to see how money given towards the poor and needy is diverted to accounts by the rich of several African countries. This is not just concentrating on Kenya, but it's several African countries. But Kenya, unfortunately, is one of those that is highlighted as the one that does that most efficiently, if I can put it that way. And we are now going to take a commercial break. There's an interesting article on page 3 of The Nation. Raila final BBI report at advanced stage after meeting women leaders. So in case you thought reggae had stopped, it looks like it's playing in the background. Maybe it is still playing in the background right there. So Raila was meeting some women yesterday, and of course they would want their voice heard in the final BBI report. We're going to take a short break. It is now just about 25 minutes after 7. When we come back, we're going to be looking at politics of betrayal. And a quick reminder of that question this morning that we're asking, and we're asking, do you think that the Deputy President William Ruto has been politically betrayed as alleged by some of his allies? Do you think the Deputy President William Ruto has politically been betrayed as alleged by some of his allies? We take that break. When we come back, let's have the discussion.